Joel Fitzgibbon, Josh Frydenberg, welcome to you both. First, perhaps to you, Josh, in Melbourne, various reports this morning suggesting that the government will not touch super concessions for those of salaries variously under $240,000 or $300,000 a year. Surely, if you're earning more than that, then your super concessions are fair game, aren't they?
Not according to Joel Fitzgibbon. I thought he said $250,000 was putting an income of $250,000 was actually not that high. The truth is the government shouldn't be touching super at all, Tim. They've got a history of whacking an extra $8 billion worth of taxes on superannuation. They've cut the co-contributions for low-income earners from $1,500 under John Howard to $500 now. And now we know that they want to hit the aspirations of Australians who are saving for their future. I mean, that is so counterproductive because we've got an ageing population. Today in Australia, about 13% of our population is over the age of 65. That will double to about 26% in the next 2 to 3 decades. And we need to encourage people to save more for the future if we're going to reduce the pressure on the government balance sheet, particularly around pensions. So I wouldn't be touching super at all if I was the government. And, you only have to listen to Martin Ferguson and Simon Crean, who say this is a class warfare from the government, and it's going to be counterproductive in the long term.
Joel Fitzgibbon, what do you think about the government suggesting that it apparently at least $240,000 salary for an individual before they'd be touched by the changes planned for the budget? That's fair enough, isn't it?
Well, first of all, Tim, I'd much rather be defending Labor's position than the position of Tony Abbott, who, of course, is not, as we are, committed to take super from 9 to 12. He's committed, though, to hitting people at the bottom end of the spectrum, something I find very, very difficult to comprehend. But we're having a good debate in the Labor Party. I mean, the budget process is a funny one. The Treasurer stands and delivers a budget on Tuesday evening in May, which is delivered as a fait accompli. What we're doing in the Labor Party is having a very healthy debate about what might be in that budget before it is delivered. And I think Simon Crean put it very well when he said that if these changes are about reform, that's a good thing because there are inequities in the systems. There are some issues in terms of sustainability. But he also said if it's about just saving a quid to rebuild a surplus, then it's the wrong path. So we're having a debate. We're now getting some good feedback. We're getting indications that the government's target is the very high end, and I welcome that.
Josh Frydenberg, you say on the one hand the government should not touch super, but on the other hand the opposition won't promise to unwind changes that the government makes. Aren't you having your cake and eating it too?
Well, the truth is we don't know how bad the books really are. I mean, we had a Treasurer who's told us that they're going to produce a budget surplus in May over 300 times, and now we're facing an up to $20 billion budget deficit. So it would be irresponsible to commit when we don't actually know what the state of the books are going to be. But the truth is we have said that we're not going to make any adverse, unexpected changes to super, and we'll stick to that. Unlike the government, who under Kevin Rudd, when he was Prime Minister, said they're not going to touch superannuation one jot, one tittle, and they've actually made significant changes. So, it's no wonder that Simon Crean, Joel Fitzgibbon, Martin Ferguson, Ed Husick, Mark Bishop, Kim Carr, and the list goes on, all Labor members who've criticised, this tax grab into super, let alone the leading economists who were members of the Henry Tax Review and other leading business people like Simon McKeon and others, and Warwick McGibbon, a former Reserve Bank Board member. All these people don't have a political axe to grind, but what they do say is do not touch super, because they understand that it's about aspirational Australia, it's about saving for the future, and it's about the long-term health, Tim, of the Australian economy.
Joel Fitzgibbon, there is a question here, isn't there, of just confidence in the system, and if people believe that governments are going to go back time and again and tinker with their savings over 30, 40, 50-year period, their saving plan for that, then we damage the system simply by changing it, don't we?
Well, that's why it's got to be about policy, Tim. I mean, Tony Abbott can't be allowed to go all the way to polling day as a small target, saying he can't promise anything because he doesn't know the state of the books. No opposition at this stage ever does. Now, this should be about reform. It should not be, as I said, and as Simon Crean has said, be about the budget. So Josh should put that aside and make commitments now not to be changing anything in super. He hasn't done that. He knows that there are some very, very respected experts out there who agree that there are inequities in the system, there are inconsistencies, and there are sustainability issues that need to be addressed. He should admit that, concede that, and cease to stand behind this fiction that because they don't know exactly the state of the books, they don't have a view on superannuation.
Want to move on from super if we can. This morning we learned that Tony Sheldon, ALP National Vice President and with the TWU, has employed 3 workers at his union under 457 visas. He, of course, referred to 457 visas as the stuff of human trafficking earlier. Is he a hypocrite, or is it reasonable, Joel Fitzgibbon, that he used these visas in that way?
It appears to me that Tony Sheldon used the visa system in the very way in which it's intended. He went out there and tested the labour market. He determined after a period of time that he wasn't able to secure what he was looking for in Australia, and no doubt he's paying, generous salaries to these people rather than flooding the market and dragging salaries down in particular sectors, which has been one of the big concerns for the government. So this is an example not of hypocrisy, but rather an example of how the visa system works very, very well for those people who need to fill a void in our own economy.
Josh Frydenberg?
This is completely farcical. I mean, Tony Sheldon's gone and appointed his chief of staff and his media officer on 457. Is what you can't find adequate people in the country on this. I mean, first we've got the Prime Minister who's employed her communications advisor on a 457. Now we've got, a leader in the union movement who's employing his personal staff on 457s. Next we'll find out workers on 457s are running for Labor pre-selection. I mean, it's just got absolutely ridiculous. Let's put some facts on the table here. Fact number 1. In January of this year, Chris Bowen, then the Minister for Immigration, said that the government had got the balance right. In fact, the Prime Minister, when, ironically, she was in Beijing in April of 2011, Tim, said on 457s, they've got the balance right. That's fact number 1. Fact number 2 is that the number of people coming in on 457s have more than doubled in the last year under this Labor government to about 125,000 now. If the government's been in power for 5 years and there's been a problem, why haven't they fixed it to now? And fact number 3 is that 457s help fill voids in the labour market. Whether it's healthcare professionals, whether it's engineers, whether it's accountants, they fill the void. They're an important part of the economy. And this government, because of its political weakness, has to go and pay its dues to the union movement, and that's where this rhetoric has come from against 457s, and it's blown up in their faces today with the revelations about Tony Sheldon.
Joel Fitzgibbon...
Jim, can I just say...
Sure,
Can I just go back to Josh's fact 1, which is just incorrect. The changes proposed by the government came not from...
They're not running for Labor pre-selection, is that right?
But from... Well, it was a good line, Josh. I suspect you thought that one up, lying in bed last night. Well done. But the facts are, Tim, that after a review of the system, it was the department that identified problems in the system. It was the department that made recommendations to the minister. In fact, those recommendations were starting to make their way to Chris Bowen before he changed portfolio, as I understand it. So this is not driven by politicians. It's normal to review these visa categories to make sure they're working well, to make sure they're working in the way in which it was intended, and it's just silly to try to make out this was an act of politicians when really it came off the back of recommendations from the department. OK,
let me touch on one act of a politician, and that is Stephen Conroy and the attempt at profound media changes that fell flat a couple of weeks ago. Not wishing to discuss the details of those, but now that we can look back, Joel Fitzgibbon, on that fight, are you a little bit saddened that the government went to war for virtually nothing over media reforms?
It's certainly true, Tim, that I was a supporter of reform, a very strong supporter of the Finkelstein recommendations, and I thought there were some great initiatives in the Convergence Review and all the recommendations that flowed from that. So, look, it's disappointing that it's all hit the wall. There'll be many in the caucus concerned about the way in which the process was rushed. No doubt that it could have been handled better. But I think Stephen Conroy was very courageous. He no doubt knew that he was picking a fight with some of the most powerful interests in the country, and he deserves recognition for having a go. It's just so disappointing that the process was imperfect and that we weren't able to bring the independents with us.
Josh Frydenberg, foreign policy, a couple of glaring foreign policy issues at the moment, not least, of course, North Korea and the threat that represents. For those of us coasting along happily in Australia, tell us why we really should be concerned about what's happening on the Korean Peninsula.
Well, it is very concerning because Kim Jong-un is a 29-year-old leader of North Korea who's unproven and unpredictable, and the country has up to a dozen nuclear weapons, it has sophisticated missile technology, and it has a standing army of more than 1 million men. And with 30,000 American troops in South Korea and more than 35,000 American military personnel in Japan, it wouldn't take much for a North Korean provocation to lead to some sort of conflict. Just a few years ago, Tim, in 2010, North Korea shelled a South Korean naval vessel, killing 46 South Korean sailors. They also shelled a South Korean island, killing innocent civilians. I think in this climate, if North Korea was to go down that path again, there would be a form of retaliation. And there are 10,000 North Korean artillery pieces aimed at Seoul, which is just 30 kilometres away from the DMZ, from the demilitarised zone. So I think this is a very dangerous situation. China, which is the one country with some leverage over North Korea, is looking exasperated at the actions of Kim Jong-un, and we just don't know how this is going to play out. But I think, the next few days could be critical.
Joel Fitzgibbon, tell us, what can the Prime Minister and our Foreign Affairs Minister do in terms of Australia's position vis-a-vis North Korea when they visit China this week? Is that a really significant visit, do you think, or not?
Well, obviously a very significant visit. I first of all agree with everything Josh has said. I mean, we're seeing a fair bit of brinkmanship and propaganda out of North Korea, but strategic tension can lead to miscalculation, and that's the real concern here. I think the international community and, of course, the Australian government is responding with the right sort of calibration, not overreacting, but taking the situation very seriously. Of course, China is a key player in this equation, and that makes the Prime Minister's visit there even more important. But, of course, it's important for so many other reasons. Our relationship with China is critical to our ongoing social and economic well-being and, of course, critical to our strategic policy.
Joel Fitzgibbon in the Hunter and Joshua Frydenberg in Melbourne, we're grateful for you both coming on Breaking Politics.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Joel.
Thanks, Josh.